All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Shelly. For those who are joining, my name is Ryan Young. I'm the Director of Business Development here at BankBound. And today on our Bound by Banking, we have Shelly. So, welcome, Shelly.
Hi, thank you.
Yeah, very good. Well, to get us started, why don't you tell us a little bit more about who you are, and kind of your background, and we'll get started with that.
Yeah, so my name is Shelly Dowell, and I have 25 years marketing experience, and 15 of those years have been in banking, actually, as a bank marketer. I recently joined the BankBound team as a senior account executive, working with other bank marketers, and I'm so excited for the opportunity. In my last corporate role at a community bank, I was the chief marketing and culture officer. And I think that, I bring a lot of experience with developing marketing strategies and using the digital channels for our clients. And so, yeah, I'm just excited to be here.
Awesome, awesome. Well, that's fantastic. You come with a lot of really good experiences, so I'm very excited to be walking through some questions with you today, getting your thoughts, kind of picking your brain per se. And so, if you are ready, Shelly, we can go ahead and dive right in. How about?
Sure.
Awesome. Okay. So, first question I have for you is what is something that banks should start preparing for now that maybe is just not getting enough attention or isn't being seen?
Yeah. So I think that, nowadays everyone is talking about AI and interest rates. And what I think is happening is that a lot of banks are missing the largest capital movement in history, and that is really a wealth transfer. There are
Mm.
studies right now that says trillions of dollars are set to transfer from baby boomers to Gen Z and millennials. And in fact, there's recent research that suggests that there's somewhere between $84 trillion and $124 trillion in assets that will change
Wow.
hands by 2048. So when I say that, the issue isn't that banks aren't prepared for the movement of the money, because as you know, with innovation and technology, we can move money pretty instantaneously. But what banks aren't prepared for is the shift of the values from the younger generations. So when you think
Mm.
about the younger generations and what's important to them, they have different views of what transparency looks like and social impact and just the digital autonomy. So when we think about, what kind of mindset those younger generations are looking for, it's really about what the purpose is for building that wealth and how they're going to use that wealth going forward. It's not so much about um, the bank relationship anymore. It's more about how they're going to be using that money. So I think, what what banks can do is stop pushing products and start family planning. And when I say family planning, I'm not speaking of a newborn baby, but what I'm
Yeah.
talking about, what I'm talking about is, having meeting with the families and not just developing that relationship with the parents, but also the children. And we're talking the 30s and 40-year-olds of those families, and building strategies to participate in the wealth together. And so, how can they create programs? How can banks, that is, create programs to really build relationships for those children, those 30 and 40-year-old children, before that transfer happens? Because again, the industry research suggests that between 70 and 80% of the heirs that will be taking in that money will they will be firing their parents' bank or their advisor the moment they receive their inheritance.
Oh, wow.
And most of that is contributed to the fact that they don't know the banks or who their financial advisor is.
Yeah. Well, and that makes sense. If they're going to be inheriting and kind of taking over this transfer of wealth, they're going to want to go to somebody that they trust,
Right,
and put that investment in there, and that could be their own bank source or somebody they find online. So,
right. Yeah, it's really important for the banks to be able to build that financial literacy gap with those heirs, those children, if you will, to really understand the responsibility of what the wealth is that they have, and how the banks really can be their partners in their future, as opposed to just being more of a transactional relationship.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very cool. Now that's a very good point there. I mean, yeah, there's going to be a very large transfer of wealth, I would say, in the next 10, 12 years, something like that.
Mhm.
So, and I'm obviously a little bit further beyond that too. So
Yeah.
I would
And
say
you
now
think
is,
about, go ahead, sorry.
I know I was going to say, so now is probably a good time to kind of start thinking about some of that stuff. So I like your
Yeah.
point there.
Yeah. And I mean, you can think about how you personally think about money, and you may or may not be inheriting wealth, but even just from the aspect of what your parents view as important versus what you
Hmm.
personally at your age feel is important. And there's a
Yep.
big difference. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. So. Very cool. Very great point. So, okay, let's go. Let's kind of ask
Mhm.
another question here. So, I know you have quite a bit of experience in marketing, especially there at the banking industry. And so, I want to ask you this
Mhm.
question of how do you balance the long-term brand building that it takes? Because that's a very long kind of payout, but also focusing on the pressure of kind of showing some of these short-term results. You almost have
Mhm.
two goals that you have to accomplish at once. How do you go about that?
Um, brand isn't just a logo. It must be viewed as an engine for sustainable profit. And I say that because, in banking, there's a lot of pressure to show immediate ROI results. And I know even just working with our clients here at BankBound, we want to try to show that ROI as quickly as possible. But there is intense pressure to hit loan targets and increase fee revenue and manage efficiency ratios. But what ends up happening is when you are using your customer relationships for those short-term gains, you wind up costing yourself that long-term trust.
Mm,
And the reality is that the brand is an accumulation of trust. It's about that experience that you're creating with your customers. In a commodity business like banking, trust is the only thing that prevents price shopping. So when it comes to what banks need to do to create that long-term brand building, it's really about operational excellence and creating that great customer experience, because nothing builds brand faster than a great customer experience. And we want to try to create that experience that they're always going to remember. It's like that saying that you'll never remember what someone said, but you'll remember how
yep.
you
Yep.
how they made you feel. And if banks start to take the 80-20 rule, and 80% of the effort stays on the engine, that brand, driving high efficiency, measurable results, and then 20% of the brand building, such as, community initiatives and financial literacy and innovation, that's really where the future market share comes from. So trying to change the measurable to the depth of the relationship, as opposed to, new accounts opened or the number of new accounts opened, and really working towards having the customer seeing you as their financial partner in
Hmm.
wellness, in their financial wellness, as opposed to just, oh, I opened up a checking for a $200 bonus.
Yeah. Or free
So,
toaster.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and that's a good point. Trust is one of those. In my opinion, I think trust is the biggest X factor. That's very hard to measure, but can have so much more value than any data and any numbers that you look at on a spreadsheet. So
Mhm.
it's one of those things that if you kind of just treat people right and do the right thing, and it happens naturally.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
very
And
cool.
making sure that your, customer experience process matches those of your brand and the core values.
Yep.
And that's one thing, actually, when I was at Town and Country, previously, the emphasis was on building the culture of creating operational excellence so that we could create those great experiences for our customers, because it was, really important to help build that brand. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Very cool. Love that answer. So, all right, Shelly, got the last one here for you. So, when you think about growth right now, what do you feel like is one of the biggest constraints or things holding banks back that they might be facing right now?
Mhm. So I think that one of the biggest constraints, and there's a couple I'd like to point out two actually, that are holding banks back from growing or the growth is legacy mindsets. The first one, it's not legacy technology, it's legacy mindsets. And I say that because, systems, they can be upgraded with any sort of budget, but the
Hmm.
culture or the mindset has to be transformed by leadership. And
Mm,
so that's a much longer process than it is to just upgrade a system.
yep.
So when you look at it, it's really risk aversion versus innovation. And today, banks banks growth is dependent upon saying yes to new ways of doing business, such as, you think about embedded finance or banking as a service, and looking at non-traditional partnerships. So the other way that banks must think about growth, and the biggest constraint is human capital. They're not competing for they're competing in this industry right now for all kinds of or all kinds of talent. And we're talking about Google and Stripe and Apple. All of these companies are competing for the same talent. And
Yeah.
if you're building a culture or a mindset that feels like a 1950s insurance office, banks will never attract that talent that they're looking for, when customers are wanting that 2030 experience, in their technology. So it's really about, in my mind, a mindset, and thinking through how can you think outside the box and create innovation while using actually regulation and compliance to your advantage, um, when it comes to that. So
Awesome.
yeah.
No, and I like your answer there about the kind of the legacy thinking. Systems and process and things like that can be updated pretty seamlessly. And even, we joke about core conversions take a long time, but I feel like the mindset shift is one
Hmm.
of those things that takes a lot longer than what we truly realize.
Right.
Of kind of that new way of thinking, and not only that, but then putting it into practice and, sort of vibe. So, that is something that, yeah, I think you were talking about some younger generations in your earlier answer. I feel like that's something that as the younger generation starts to come into different roles within the bank, I think you're starting to get a very good mixture of all different types of thinking
Right.
and viewpoints.
Hmm. Yeah, we're creating it's really about the experience, because you think about, even the question you asked earlier about brand building. You're creating that experience to create convenience for your customers. You want to be where your customers are. So if you
Hmm.
even think of an example of, say you're buying something and there's Shopify integrated into the platform, and all of a sudden you can then, take out credit for purchasing that item. Well, there's a bank partner that is, behind that Shopify platform, that when I say banks need to explore the non-traditional partnerships, that's really what I'm talking about. Where can they be? Where can they meet their customers along the customer's journey to create that experience?
Awesome.
Yeah,
Very cool. No, that's a,
yeah,
that's a great answer. I love it. So, very cool. Well, Shelly, thank you so much today for joining us. Really, really appreciate it. Loved hearing your answers and your insight, and obviously your experience. I think speaks volume to the knowledge that you bring today. So I really appreciate you joining us today.
absolutely.
Very cool. Well, thank you again, Shelly.
Thank you.
Bye.